Hello, and welcome to our ongoing podcast series on moving the needle on wicked problems. Today, we continue to talk about racism and diversity in Canada. And for this episode, we will be looking at the arts, movies, theater, television, music in Canada and around the world. We want to know if the arts has a diversity problem. Is there space for diverse voices on stage, in the writing and directing and editing rooms, or as producers? Do arts organizations do enough to recruit and promote BIPOC actors and actresses, producers and directors? And what impact does diversity, or the lack thereof, have on the stories that are told by and about Canadians?
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. I think we've heard many voices complain that, BIPOC stories haven't been told or supported. Often we see, actors, BIPOC actors that, they don't really have the leading roles. They're pushed to the second or third supporting character. But it's kind of peculiar that this even happens in the sense that we know there's actually a big market for BIPOC stories. Canadians, people around the world want to see them. We see that with the success of movies like The Black Panther or Crazy Rich Asians. So, there is this growing sense that there is a need to have more diversity. So why don't we just get to the interview?
So today we're speaking to Ravi Jain, who is the founding artistic director of Why Not Theatre in Toronto. Ravi is very well known in Toronto circles, and I would suggest in Canadian circles. He's been twice shortlisted for the 2016 and 2019 Siminovitch Prize and won the 2012 Pauline McGibbon Award for Emerging Director and the 2016 Canada Council John Hirsch Prize for Direction. His play, Seasick, which he has co-directed, is currently being screened at COP 2026 in Glasgow right now. Isn't that marvelous? And his adaptation of the wonderful Indian epic Mahabarata will premiere at the Shaw Festival in 2023. And he's also been working with David Suzuki in a piece called What You Won't Do for Love, which because of the COVID crisis has pivoted from being a piece of theater to a film which will premiere in Vancouver later on this year. On a personal note, in 2014, I think it was, or 2013, Ravi and his mother, Asha, accompanied me to Berlin, where he and his mother performed A Brimful of Asha, which is one of my all-time favorites of retelling the immigrant narrative set in the Canadian context. And the ambassador in Berlin, our ambassador in Berlin, told me she had never seen the embassy rock more with laughter than it did that day. So welcome. We're talking serious stuff, but hopefully we can also throw in some humor. So
we can have a
today,
giggle.
absolutely, that was a wonderful event. One of my favorite shows of your shows, although clearly I'm going to go and see many more. So back to our serious topic. You've been an artist in the Toronto scene and the Canadian scene for a very long time. I know that. And what was your experience of racism? I mean, how did it express itself?
Yeah, well, so first, thanks to both of you for having me on the podcast. Yeah, so I would say I grew up in Toronto and I left for university. And so I was working and living abroad for about 8 years before coming back to Toronto to be a theater artist. So in 2007, I came back and I had worked with incredible international artists, like definitive artists who were shaping contemporary theater. I had, worked with them and had a chance to either train or work with them. And so when I came to Toronto, a lot of people, one, didn't know who those people were. And two, when they saw me, they just assumed that I should be in shows that were South Asian themed or that I should start a South Asian theater company. I was told that so many times. And I thought, that's so strange because I I'm like whiter than most Canadians. I grew up in Canada. Of course I have an Indian background, I have Indian culture, but I don't speak Hindi. I speak French better than I speak Hindi. So the way I was seen versus who I was a really strange kind of, there was a disconnect for me. And more importantly, I had trained in Europe and America. And so the language of theater that I spoke was very, let's say, for lack of a better word, it was very white. It was very Euro. It was very, it wasn't South Asian to say the least. So what was strange for me was having the diverse background of training that I had, but always being approached as, oh, well, you need to be in that South Asian play. You need to be a South Asian artist. And I really didn't understand what that meant. And so I spent a lot of my career fighting that stereotype. And for me, I met an amazing British Indian director named Jatinder Verma, who really in 2010 shifted my perspective around this. He was making theater in England at a really racist period of time. They would put on shows and then come outside afterwards and get into fights because the violence was so thick. And he said, for him, at the time, they were using their roots to discover other roots of creation. So they were not culturally specific. They were the avant-garde. And that was the thing that I really latched onto, was to say, I'm an avant-garde artist. I'm not a South Asian artist. I'm like, you all praise Robert Lepage. Well, I'm like him. Why isn't he a white artist or a Quebec artist? I mean, although he would probably say he's a Quebec artist, but I want to be like everyone else. And so my identity became my lens that became really unique and innovative and became my way of expressing my kind of avant-gardeness. But yeah, I had to really, really shake off that, the way people saw me, and especially the way I dressed. Like I would often wear a kurta with jeans. And so these assumptions about who I was were always put on me before I even opened up my mouth.
That is so true. The assumptions people make about you based on your on the way you look, on your race or your gender or the way you dress, as opposed to who you really are. I really identify with that, by the way. I too am sometimes, I would say, not sometimes, often seen as a South Asian senator when I just want to be the senator. But now that you are successful, and let me suggest that you are super successful, can you reflect outside, what you've shared? Can you reflect on how you overcame this sort of persistent view of yourself, which was filtered through a lens that didn't reach you, but some image of you that people had, and how did you actually go about, making a film about David Suzuki that's going to be aired this year?
Yeah, I mean, I just worked constantly, and I was collaborating with as many people as possible to redefine the expectation. And so, for me as an artist, the work that I always made, it always was just a little different. It just wasn't what was being seen in Toronto, in the years that I was kind of coming up. I was always bringing another, flavor, let's say, or a masala, if we want to be culturally specific. I was trying to do something different. And so the work that I was making was starting it was being known for being just different. It was either really physically inventive, or the story we were telling, the way we were doing it was unique. And I ensured to make that my brand, so to speak. But then it was funny because in 2012, when I had this hit show, as you mentioned, A Brimful of Asha, which is a show with my real life mother, who we talk about how my parents tried to arrange my marriage. And so in the show, I'm talking about with my mother the divide, being a Canadian and being an Indian, and that my mom and I are both straddling these two worlds, and it's very hard to navigate. But it was this Indian show, and all of a sudden it reconfirmed people's view of me in a lot of ways, even though for me, a lot of people would talk about the Indianness of the show, and oh, how cool to have your mom, and talking about arranged marriage, huh? And I would always point to the New York Times. The New York Times quote was that it's pioneering in its form. It's pioneering, it's heartwarming and pioneering and inventive for the form, because of the way my mom and I perform together. And so I had to, even in that show with that huge success, had to point to the avant-gardeness of it and take the shine off the Indianness of it. Even though I was super proud of that, I knew I needed to challenge that with the work we made. So with my company, Why Not Theater, as it evolved, at every turn, I was always defying expectations. So, it's grown now to, it's rare for independent companies to grow in Canada in general, and it's even rarer to do that without purchasing a venue. And we managed to grow from being just me to a team of 12 people, an operating budget of $2 million, and I think by doing that, by defying odds like that and being creative, I've managed to have people see me the way I want them to see me rather than the way they want to see me.
That's actually quite remarkable, an independent theater company without a venue, as you say. And I wonder if when you embarked on this, setting up an independent company of 12 people with a $2 million budget, what's the greatest risk you think you have taken? Was it performing that Brimful of Asha, which is the cornerstone of your success? But was that also a risk of being pigeonholed?
I mean, it's funny. Risk it's all in the eye of the beholder. I mean, for me, it was a no-brainer to do the show with my mother, for example. Like, I knew she was charming. I believed in it. And so for me, you always risk failure, but the belief in what I was doing was always stronger. I think, though, in general, the risk for me as a company has been I've had to go a different way. I think that the system in general, like, I always knew, I have a lot of friends who are in other industries, and they're very successful, and they've been able to, you get on a partner track or whatever, you get to graduate within your profession. In the arts, that kind of graduation doesn't really exist. It's very much a lottery, and in particular, to be the artistic director of a major company, an institution, those jobs are few and they're rare when they come up, and they're traditionally held by white men. Now we're maybe in a change, but my journey of navigating those institutions, I always started with the traditional path, and then I had to subvert and take the risk to do my own thing. And so really investing in my own work and my company's work was the biggest risk. That could have been a tremendous failure. But you have to do something different if you want to, survive, I guess. And for me, it's what I feel, my company is what I feel the art should do, which is surprise people, redefine what the arts can be in society. And at a lot of those institutions, I don't know if they're doing that, or if I'd have the freedom to do that. I have to bet on myself.
Well, I just wanted to point out, Senator, this is our first baby is on the podcast today.
Oh, wow,
I
good.
just thought I would.
Yeah.
5 months old, hopefully sleeping well. Looks like
He's
sleeping well, actually.
But
you just mentioned something, and the senator talked about it. Part of the reason why we wanted to do this podcast and particularly a mini series on diversity and racism in various sectors is, I guess I just want to ask: is there a racism and diversity problem in the arts sector in Canada? How do you think it manifests itself? And you could talk about, people have written that, and you've sort of mentioned it as well, that a lot of the theater landscape is predominantly white, or at least the directors and maybe the producers are as well. Like, where are we at in Canada, for that situation in the arts sector?
Yeah, so I'm really excited by this question because I've been doing a lot of thinking about it, and I think where to start, where that's really important, is really the foundation of the arts in Canada, and this thing called the Massey Commission. And what that was in the 1950s was Vincent Massey did a kind of study, and it was the first sort of cultural policy for the arts the Canadian government invested in. And they did it because they were under threat of American culture, and they were looking for what is a Canadian culture. And embedded in the fabric of that document is a ton of racist language, particularly towards Indigenous arts and culture, where Indigenous culture is seen as, it's community oriented. It won't survive, and like the Indigenous people, it won't survive. So it's not worth investing in. And like this is in the root of the document. And so so out of the Massey Commission is born, things like major institutions. The Canada Council is born out of it. I believe the National Arts Centre comes out of that. You have the operas, the ballets, the big regional theaters. All of these institutions that are inheriting European legacies. Those are the foundation of the arts in the 50s. So as we go on and Canadians start, the idea of Canadians starts to change, those institutions are constantly being challenged. And at each stage, there's less and less money to be given to those new sets of voices. So challenging the Euro institutions was the Canadian playwright. And, the East Coast in particular, like and the prairies, where are those voices? Then after that comes, like women, where are we? And then queer people, trans, different sexualities and gender orientations. And then comes racialized people. And at each stage, there's less and less money. And so in the foundation, because we value these operas, these ballets, we don't have new institutions being born. It's all because the bulk of the resource is being held at the top. No new institutions are being born. No different perspectives are being funneled or given platforms. So already in that, you valued certain voices over other voices. So that trickles down to who's on stage, who's telling the story, all of these things. It's been a long time of a single perspective. And so yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, that's basically systemic racism in and of itself.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, the arts is like every sector, like, arts is a reflection of society. So if society has a systemic racism problem, definitely the arts does too. It's all of the values and the ways of being are, that's what the arts is. It's culture. It's an expression of our culture. So it has to be the same.
Now, people have been challenging, as you just mentioned, for decades, this sort of institutional bias and the systemic nature of it. But we're kind of wondering, though, has there been a ramp up in the last, say, year and a half, with George Floyd, people going to the streets and really trying to make, anti-racism and diversity an important issue. We've talked to journalism people already. They're saying that, more and more people are saying that we need more diversity there. Are we finding that there is this ramping up of trying to break down these institutional barriers?
I would controversially say no. I think the challenge is, I feel like we had a moment and everyone was learning a new language, but I would say that it's remained language. And what we're seeing is a resistance to change the system. If you don't change the system, you don't change anything. And so all of these inequities of class, of race, they don't change if the entire structures aren't changed. So for example, what I described in terms of the funding, it hasn't changed. So therefore, we value certain voices over others, literally with money. We might be changing certain leadership, might be changing more voices on stages, more voices in films. Maybe people are diversifying. And now people are, I would say, are more afraid of making mistakes because they'll be called out. So if you hire a white person in a role for a Black artist, that you won't get away with that anymore. So there's more accountability, let's say, but the systems haven't changed. And so what I'm seeing a lot of is, in particular, is a lot of people who continue to hold power, who have a new language. They do land acknowledgements before meetings. They know the words accountability. They know to say, I use the pronouns he, him. They've learned a language, but they haven't changed the power structures. And so in the arts in particular, I would say in Canada, I would argue that that's definitely where we're at.
It's really interesting when you talk about performance art in this way as a sorry substitute for real action and meaningful action. Um, I'm maybe one of the more naive people. When I look at the arts and culture, I see talent like you and others shining through, and I think that the arts and culture sector is possibly more welcoming of talent because talent shines like you do. But I appreciate what you're saying. On the other hand, uh, there's this uh, 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 there's this proliferation of what I would call the cancel culture as well. And again, the arts is front and center of canceling people. I'll just give you a few examples. Michelle Latimer, Joseph Boyden, maybe Albert Schultz. There are others. Do you think this is part of performance art then? Or does that really go to a deep-rooted sense of change and doing things differently?
I think that we're at a time where we're still figuring out this new language, and we're still trying to understand power. And I think in a lot of the debates, a lot of nuance is lost because we're still very early in this change. And the speed of change isn't, the expectations and the speed of change aren't the same for everyone. And so I think that what that causes is a kind of tension. I don't know if I would say, I think any loss of power feels like oppression. And when I hear people talk about cancel culture, I tend to see examples where that's actually what's happening, is because you're not allowed to plant your flag here, you feel like it's oppressive. Then there are more complex ones like Michelle Latimer, which I think is a very complex issue. And, depending on what perspective you have, it's tough. And these things are gray and nuanced. And I don't have an answer other than to point to the history, where the history has been very exclusive and has been dominated by a single perspective. And no doubt, because we all made commitments to change, now it's kind of open season. And there's going to be a kind of violence that has to emerge, because it's not going to be easy. And so I think we're presented with a lot of confusing, conflicting examples, like you mentioned, that will, maybe a couple of years from now, when we have more perspective, we might think, oh, I see that differently.
Okay. We'll come back next time maybe to this question. It's one that does interest me a great deal, because I see its expressions again and again. And even the baby sees its
expression. He wants more nuance. He just wants more nuance.
All right, over to you, Paul. Next question. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to, sort of follow up on some of the things that you were, sort of talking about with diversity. And, there's been sort of studies that have done that, essentially, the Canada's 4 largest public art museums, the majority of the directors or not even the majority, the vast majority of directors are white, senior executives are white. There does seem to be this lack of diversity in the governance of Canada's arts institutions, not only as we talked about on stage, but in the people that are deciding these things. What can we do there to change that? Is there something that the government can do maybe to increase diversity, to have it better reflect Canadian society, and then once we have that diversity and more, we can actually then start telling more and more diverse stories.
I think the biggest thing in what you said is we keep looking to the institution to solve our problems. And it's not in the institution. The majority of the arts is community-based, particularly when you're dealing with racialized artists who are working with communities. That isn't to say it's of a lesser quality. It still can be professional and world-class excellence. but it doesn't necessarily happen in the spaces of those buildings that, you know, a lot of people never walk into. Like, think about that. In a city like Toronto, there are people who never walk into our theaters ever. They don't even know they exist because the institution hasn't done its job. And so how are we thinking about what purpose the arts serves? What function does it serve in society? And is it the venue? So is the AGO where we should consume and experience visual art? Can it be a community center? Can the group of 7 be hosted at a community center in Brampton? How can we rethink our institutions? I would say that's the biggest thing, is we've relied on them for too long, and I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. And so, from a government standpoint, I would say if we flip the pyramid and thought about actually funding community organizations to the same level that we fund, the institutions, you'd have a totally different relevance and meaning for the arts. You'd have a different audience base and connection if it could be a viable profession at the bottom of the pyramid.
Is that conversation happening, Ravi?
I don't think so, because people don't want to change the system. And you wrote a fantastic article about systemic racism and philanthropy, and that's part of the thing is money wants to be named on an institution as well. And so can we subvert and rethink what role the institution can play to plant seeds in communities and plant seeds to really give artists the resource that they don't have access to?
And I'm sort of thinking of it as well in the sense of, diversity is not only just, the right thing to do to reflect the stories of Canadians, reflect the stories of the world, but actually there's an economic argument to be said too here, right? I mean, your production was very successful. We have, big movies, Black Panther, Crazy Rich Asians, et cetera, that are now starting to demonstrate, which I'm surprised it's taken us so long to get there, that there's big audiences, lots of money to be made for having specifically BIPOC stories and being told. So is that something that people need to start to to understand and become aware of, that there is actual and economic benefit to the arts community to tell these stories?
Yeah, I think that's important. I also think that it's important to understand, like where I began, that we're also in hybrid culture. So I created a production of Hamlet that was bilingual in American Sign Language and a female Hamlet and a diverse cast. Where I just directed a production of Romeo and Juliet at Stratford with a 14-year-old Asian Juliet, a Black young Romeo, and a blind artist playing the friar. And why I cite those is to say, our like brand is diversity is our strength, but we rarely use that. And so I think yes, there's an economic gain, and there is an audience, a wider audience to be found in the hybridity of what kind of stories we're telling, what kind of artists we have reflecting their representing those stories. But I also think there's a fundamental thing about the arts and its role in society, and that for me is about belonging and about a narrative, a cultural narrative. And that to me is more important than the economic driver. It's about who we are as a people and democracy, who we let have a voice and a place at this table. And the next level of nuance to this is there are artists of color who tell stories that aren't about their identity, and they don't want to tell stories about their identity, and they should have the freedom to do so. There's just a lot of barriers to allow that to happen, and those stories can be really successful. Kim's Convenience is a great example. Even though it is about identity, it was a play that got turned into this hit TV show and went the distance. But there are a lot of examples that didn't get the opportunity to hit that what's it called, like that accelerator, let's say, or that path to success, the resource path to success. And we have many more stories available to us in this country that we lose out on because the artists don't stay in the profession. They go to the States, they go to the UK, and that brain drain is really severe because it's a small pond here.
Oh, I hadn't quite thought of the brain drain of artists. You're absolutely right. Our most successful artists tend to go somewhere else where they are more highly valued. But I've also heard you say, in a sense, I think you're saying we need to defund the cultural institutions, which is radical. I mean, as radical as defund the police, maybe, but still, it's fairly radical. And that's the only way you can invert the pyramid in a way, so that we get more the stories of the people on the stages, the music of the people in the orchestras, etc., etc. I think that's that. I'm sorry to hear that the discussion is not happening because, you follow the money, you kind of see where the power is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's happening. I just don't think the action is happening. And for me too, it's sure defund the institution, but I think it's also rethink the institution, rethink its role. I don't think anyone's really thinking about their role as a cultural institution, to really think about how can it. I mean, look, people are thinking about broadening their audiences, but I think when it falls into the economic side, it doesn't make it an authentic change or a lasting one, because when economics change, so do priorities and values. And so how to maintain a more committed, sort of broader, have a broader perspective that stays committed.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say is, beyond the business imperative of broadening your audience, there is a social, let's say, a social cohesion imperative, a moral imperative, a truth-telling imperative to be brought to the table. And since we've just come out of the COVID crisis, I'm curious to know how artists like you have survived. I mean, it's been difficult for you all along. The COVID crisis must have made it doubly, triply more difficult for you. Where did you find the strength to keep doing your work?
Well, I think here, it's super important to just recognize the support the government gave and came in with. Not all artists experienced the pandemic in the same way. A lot of freelance artists in particular were really helped out by CERB. Oh, hold on, buddy.
She likes that CERB, I can hear.
Yes, CERB really helped. So many artists that I spoke to felt more financially secure during the pandemic than they ever had in their lives.
Wow.
And that makes a difference. For us, being a company and being an organization, the wage subsidy really helped us, keep jobs and stay open. The hardest part was not being able to gather with people, and that there was this real push to online, which is not our business. And that was a really hard thing to kind of go through, because a lot of money was being driven and a lot of desire was being sent to, continue the performing arts online, which isn't really the right medium for what we do. And so there was a lot of hard learnings that had to happen. And, we got to practice new skills and do things. But at the end of the day, gathering in person with a little baby is really what we do. So how did we go on? I mean, luckily, I have a group of people that I work with. So we kept each other positive when we cried. Hey,
well, let's keep the baby's needs under consideration. Paul, why don't you ask the last question and then we can wrap up to let
certainly
the baby. Yeah.
Well, I was before we get to the question, I was just thinking, sir, maybe basic income for artists or something, maybe going forward is not a bad idea. But just the last thing, and you're doing great work of balancing both things here. One of the things that we have coming soon, we have coming soon back into the Senate, I guess, is Bill C-10, which is trying to modernize the the way that artists are basically looked after when it comes to streaming giants, to be able to make some more money there if they have that. Streaming giants like Netflix, Spotify would actually, being giving money into the system. There's some concern about this bill, about that it may trample on some, free expression rights of Canadians. Is there anything that you have thought about with this bill? Is it a positive step forward that we can sort of take with us as we examine it over the next coming months?
I think that I don't know enough of the nuance of the bill, but I would say when, having, Netflix and major streaming platforms, if there is money being taken out of the community, how to put it back in the community, that makes a lot of sense to me. The question becomes, where does that money go, as always?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And oftentimes the approach is to give it to institutions and organizations that exist, and it rarely gets to the artists. Particularly, and I've experienced this with film. Film is a whole other playground to play in that a lot of particularly racialized artists don't have access to. The equipment, the knowledge, the training. Of course, there's tons of racialized artists who are in the film industry, don't get me wrong, but in terms of the performing arts transitioning into film, a lot of thought needs to go in, if we're really serious about doing that, how to create the supports and the access to the resource required to be able to even engage in film. So even writing for film and TV is a whole other can of worms than writing for the theater. So if that resource can get sent down and really further down, without the gatekeeper of the institution, I think that's always the step that's missed.
Okay, well, I really want to thank you, Ravi, for sharing your thoughts with us and for bringing a baby on the show.
Yeah.
I think that's a first time. We will be sure to let everyone know that there's a baby on board now. I want to also thank our listeners and remind them, if you have questions or ideas or even potential speakers, just email me and I will be able to get back to you in good time, as I hope to, so that we continue to curate the series in a manner that speaks to your interests. So we're always happy to hear from you. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.